G'day everyone, I'm the Gravetender, and welcome to the other side. In 2005, Pandemic Studios gave us one of the most unique takes on the GTA formula with Destroy All Humans. It was a game which gave players the freedom to explore a multitude of small, open worlds, rich in detail, and stupid humans to torment. Whether on the ground or in the air, this was a game which gave you a wide multitude of ways to conduct yourself, and thanks to its snarky alien protagonist, players everywhere could indulge in some very enjoyable gunplay. So it shouldn't have been a surprise that within less than a year that this game would get a sequel, and with it a new franchise was born. But despite the initial success, it would seem that this series never could move beyond the heights of its first two entries. However, now that the first game has been completely remade from the ground up, could we be seeing an actual continuation to this story in the future? Well, before we get that far, we should probably talk about the remake, so let's get started. This is Destroy All Humans. Taking place in 1959, the game follows a pair of aliens known as Furons. These extraterrestrials have managed to become highly advanced by cloning themselves. With each new clone, they transfer their memories and personalities, effectively making themselves immortal. However, as the years have gone by, each new clone has begun developing errors in their genetic material. So if the Furons can't find themselves a new source of pure Furon DNA to harvest, then eventually they will clone themselves to extinction. Which brings us to Earth, where the Furon Crypto-136 was sent to investigate a potential source of pure Furon DNA. However, after losing contact with him, the newly cloned Crypto-137 and his boss, a scientist named Orthopox, decide to go to Earth themselves and investigate his disappearance. What follows is a story that will take us all over America, from farms in the country to beachside towns and even vast military complexes. The world is yours for the taking, and Crypto is more than equipped to handle whatever comes his way.
Hey, where's the... What did you do with my clip, monkey boy? Phew! So much for wholesale carnage. I guess I'll just have to settle for ripping your limbs off one by one with my bare hands until I find it. With my bare hands.
Of course, that's not to say you'll spend every waking moment blowing things up. In fact, you'll spend just as much time sneaking around and manipulating the ignorant humans as you work to harvest their brains. All the while, you have to contend with the police, rowdy farmers, the military, and the mysterious organization, Majestic, who unlike the rest are fully aware of what you are capable of and are amassing new ways to combat the Furon Empire. As you progress throughout the story, Pox will relay instructions to Crypto from the mothership. Occasionally, the two of them will bicker like an old married couple, but for the most part they're always on the same side. Crypto and Pox's relationship is very much that of an evil genius working with his more competent and eviler henchmen. Their chaotic banter is present in every mission, and thankfully most of the writing still holds up even after all these years. In fact, if you didn't know that this game was a remake, you'd just assume the entire story was a love letter to old sci-fi movies. Aside from interactions between Pox and Crypto, the rest of the game's story is told from the lens of an omnipotent observer. We get to witness how the humans deal with the sudden arrival of aliens during this paranoid period in American history. The General, Dick Armquist in particular, was always a source of hilarity. He constantly accused Crypto of being a communist despite possessing weaponry and skills that no normal human should have. You'd think that Crypto's big head and teeth would give away the fact that he's an alien, but apparently not. Regardless, most of the human characters are pretty forgettable. Those few who stand out play a key role in the story, while the rest are simply made up of reused NPC skins. In fact, the whole story of Destroy All Humans isn't what you'd call groundbreaking. It's more or less just a setup for giving the player control over an incredibly powerful alien with a vast array of weaponry. Which isn't a bad thing, in fact the game developers were clearly aware of this. Despite how dark the story might become, the overall consensus is that the narrative and the characters in it aren't taking themselves very seriously. It's a nice change of pace, especially since we all know why we play this game. Not to explore some deep and complex themes of communism or the 50s, but to simply murder some stupid humans. Gameplay can be broken down into two basic areas, the ground and the sky. One is dedicated to Crypto and his abilities, while the other is focused on his spaceship. When it comes to Crypto and how he can conduct himself in combat, the player is given plenty of options. For starters, he has 4 weapons to utilize, which, just like his source's weapons, progressively unlock as you play. Starting off with the Zap-O-Matic, a simple gun that fires a stream of lightning at your enemies. When upgraded, can damage multiple targets at once. Next is the Disintegrator Ray, which has a name that speaks for itself and is easily one of the best weapons in the game. It's your best option to deal damage fast and turn some puny humans into dust. Meanwhile, the anal probe serves as an effective means of collecting human brains. Firing the gun causes the enemies to lose health over time until their heads explode. For reference, have you ever seen scanners? Well, it's basically the same thing, only with less blood. Finally, there's the ion detonator, which is basically an alien grenade launcher. It's perfect for wiping out large groups of enemies or destroying tanks and other vehicles. Each of these weapons have their own uses in combat, but despite how destructive they might be, they each have a finite number of shots before you run out, or they need to recharge. Swapping to another weapon usually works in most cases, but it's best to keep in mind that 2 of these weapons require actual ammo. Thankfully, Crypto is psychic and can use his insane mental abilities to transform everyday objects into ammo. So reloading is less of a question of how long it'll take a box to turn into some grenades, and more of a question of how fast you can mash a button until it transforms into those grenades. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Crypto's combat abilities. Like I said, Furons are psychic beings and can harness their mental abilities in a number of different ways. Turning everyday objects into ammo is just one thing that they can do. Their most common ability being lifting objects with their minds, and you'll find yourself doing this a lot more than you would have in the original game. Since in the remake the game developers have changed it so now whenever you use your telekinesis you can also use your weapons at the same time. This essentially allows you to dual wield your mental and physical weaponry. By giving the player the means to use their abilities and weapons simultaneously, it negates the original's stiffer and at times unfocused controls. Originally, you'd have to constantly switch between weapons or your mental abilities, which would often cost you health in many of the larger combat encounters. But with this new setup though, you're able to save time, which in turn increases the speed and intensity present in combat. This seems to be a reoccurring theme within this remake. Black Forest Games have taken the original's design and simply fine-tuned the gameplay to increase the player's mobility. This in turn has made combat easier for the player to master without sacrificing any of its difficulty. From the user interface to the controls themselves, key aspects of Crypto's design has been tweaked to provide players with the best experience possible. This is best exemplified in Crypto's movement speed. In the original, Crypto was limited to simply running around, and when you wanted to move faster, you'd have to utilize his jetpack, which on its own could clear some distance, but it ran out of fuel very quickly. While in the remake the jetpack still has a limited fuel supply, it seems that the developers have given the player more time in the air before running out. Furthermore, gliding with the jetpack is a lot easier since it doesn't stutter while you're in the air. But that's not all. Aside from these simple changes, the developers have also added a quick dash into Crypto's arsenal, enabling the player to quickly move out of harm's way, and when upgraded will allow you to effectively skate across the battlefield at a frighteningly fast pace. This, when combined with the jetpack's easier controls and speed, makes it a more viable means of maneuvering around your environment. Also, I won't deny it's just a lot of fun to just skate around, electrocuting people who pass you by. However, when you're not indulging in some enjoyable mass genocide, Destroy All Humans takes a page out of the Hitman franchise and gives you the task of infiltrating society as a normal human. Now, I should say I always try to be honest whenever I review games, so I'll be blunt here. The stealth is without question the weakest part of this game. Listen, I enjoy a good stealth segment, and if your game is built around the idea of carefully avoiding detection, then you're usually guaranteed for some solid stealth gameplay. Yet even in this remake with its more refined controls, I still don't like the stealth portions of Destroy All Humans. It's not because the stealth hasn't been polished, in fact I'd say that it hasn't been better. Crypto can use his mental abilities to take the form of any human he sees, and if there's a crowd or a witness to his sudden transformation, then he can easily wipe the person's memory so that he doesn't alert any nearby guards. If that doesn't work, then he can always cause a distraction by making someone dance like a fool. Of course, once you obtain your disguise, you'll need to maintain it, which is done by listening to people's thoughts. This action recharges your holobob and ensures that everyone will keep seeing you as a normal human. To complicate things though, many missions will require you to obtain a particular disguise in order to access certain areas. Furthermore, as you progress through the game, you'll encounter enemies or hazards which can actually sense your presence. This gives Destroy All Humans stealth more of a puzzle element than one simply based around avoiding detection. At times, you'll even be required to impersonate a human in front of a live audience, with your goal being to say whatever will allow you to progress without raising any suspicion, all the while resisting your alien instincts to exterminate the vermin in front of you. So there's clearly some depths in the stealth sections, and these moments where you can imitate another person can result in some very funny dialogue. So, why don't I enjoy these parts of the game? Well, to put it simply, you can't do much during these instances. Unlike the core gameplay, which is brimming with complex combat and traversal mechanics, the stealth is quite lackluster, and the missions, which deliberately focus on this aspect of gameplay, do tend to drag on. Most of the time, these instances boil down to traveling from one location to the next without breaking your disguise. Yet I never felt as though I was in much danger during a stealth mission. In fact, most of the time I was kinda hoping I'd get to break my disguise just so I could kill something already. Which isn't a good feeling to have, especially in a stealth game. It also doesn't help that your character's movement speed is limited while you're in stealth mode. So overall, I would say that the stealth is at its best when it's in short instances and not during any of the longer missions. Yet while the stealth gameplay is pretty bland, the same couldn't be said for Crypto's Saucer, which despite being one of the simplest designed aspects of Destroyer Humans is still one of the most enjoyable. Often you'll utilize your saucer to cause wide-scale destruction, blowing up buildings, erasing entire armies, or simply lifting up objects with your tractor beam. Whatever the mission requires you to do while in the air, Pox will make sure you're perfectly equipped for whatever comes your way. The saucer has 3 primary weapons. The first of which is the Death Ray, a simple beam of concentrated energy that burns through buildings and leaves a noticeable trail wherever it goes. Second is the Sonic Boom, which is the ship's equivalent of a shotgun. It has limited ammo, but when fired it can cause large amounts of damage very quickly. Furthermore, when it's fired in succession, it can tear through buildings quite easily. Finally, there's the Quantum Deconstructor, which is without question the most powerful weapon in the game and can cause widespread destruction with just one shot. However, the trade-off for this weapon is that it's got the least amount of ammo in the whole game. So you'll need to upgrade your saucer quite a lot to be able to fire it multiple times. Still, it's worth it just so you can bear witness to the most satisfying explosions in the whole game. With these 3 weapons, you'll be able to easily spread chaos wherever you go, and since the saucer naturally flies over its environment, you won't run the risk of running into any buildings while you're on a rampage. Of course, that doesn't mean you're invincible in the air. In fact, the saucer is quite susceptible to taking damage. Throughout the game, you have to contend with new hazards on the ground and in the air which will damage your saucer, from towers that shoot lightning, giant robots, and even literal minefields. Humanity's ingenuity is quite impressive. Thankfully, unlike the original, the remake has taken steps to ensure it's easier for you to survive aerial combat. For starters, you can take cars and objects in your environment and transform them into ammo and health for your saucer, which not only ties into Crypto's own abilities, but is also a lot easier to manage, especially when compared to the original, which forced you to fly around the environment and pick up health and ammo. Furthermore, you still have to contend with homing missiles and other high-impact projectiles, but now you can release a burst of energy from your ship, which, when timed right, blocks any incoming projectiles. Additionally, if it's upgraded, then you can actually redirect these attacks back at your enemy. It's a simple yet effective addition which helps stop the saucer segments from becoming too difficult. These changes to the ship's gameplay have not only helped elevate it, but also allowed the difficulty in the game to feel more natural as a result. Speaking of which, one of the newer additions to Destroy All Humans ties right into this idea, and that's the inclusion of side objectives. These don't drastically alter the overall structure of the missions, instead they serve as more of a bonus challenge for players, often requiring you to perform a specific action which can drastically alter how you play a mission or even increase the difficulty in certain areas. For example, one challenge is for you to complete an objective without touching the ground. This naturally tests your skills with the jetpack, and since the mission already features a time limit, you're forced to consider the fastest route throughout the game world to avoid failure. These optional challenges can provide you with new ways to tackle your favorite missions, and should you complete all the challenges in certain missions, then you'll even unlock a new skin for Crypto. A collectible like this would have been especially difficult to acquire in the original game since you couldn't replay missions. But now it's easier for you to do exactly that since you can replay missions from the mothership. However, these optional challenges aren't the only way of testing yourself. Outside the main story, there's also a selection of side missions featured in the open world. Each one of them can provide you with more human DNA should you complete them. Of course, on a first playthrough, you'll naturally find them extremely difficult, since most of them will require Crypto's skills and weapons to be at a certain level before you can properly tackle them. But you can easily purchase all of your upgrades after completing the main story if you prefer to wait. Otherwise, these side missions can feel more like a grind than a genuine challenge. Still, earning a perfect rank for any of these missions is ultimately dependent on what the mission is and the stipulation for earning extra points. There are 4 types of side missions and each one has their own basic gimmick to them. Abduction asks the player to toss select objects into a massive tractor beam for study. Armageddon tasks you with destroying as many buildings and objects as possible. The more expensive the target, the more points you'll earn. Racing speaks for itself. Chase an alien probe around the map as fast as possible while collecting the DNA it ejects from itself. Finally, there's Rampage, which essentially asks you to cause as much chaos as possible, much to Crypto's delight. These 4 side missions each provide enough variety to keep you engaged, but they're also rather short when compared to the main missions. Aside from these challenges, there's also alien probes scattered throughout each map. Finding one unlocks some concept art and gives Crypto some more human DNA, so there's good enough reason to seek them out if you can. But I found myself often just stumbling upon these while playing the game rather than actively searching for them. Since there's no real value to them aside from that, they're mostly just an afterthought rather than a collectible you're encouraged to seek out. Still, even if you do find the side content to be pretty lackluster, there's no denying that you could spend hours just going from one location to another, destroying everything you see. An activity which is only made more enjoyable thanks to how good looking this game is. From a visual standpoint, Destroy All Humans is simply gorgeous. When comparing the graphics with that of the original, everything is just so much more detailed and nuanced. While the developers have managed to retain the game's cartoony aesthetic, they've also succeeded in increasing the complexity of the visuals. Crypto in particular has received quite the noticeable upgrade. His basic look is a lot more refined, while his alien features appear more natural, which is only further emphasized by the numerous skins you can unlock for him, all of which seem to be perfectly tailored for this outlandish universe that you're in. But there's also plenty of subtle details, from the way the death ray leaves a noticeable trail as it burns the environment, to the heat exhaust emitting from your jetpack. Destroy All Humans is full of subtle and easy to miss details, which simply makes this world you inhabit feel so much more alive. If I were to grade my most recent reviews in the remake scene, then Ratchet & Clank would probably be a B-, while Destroy All Humans would get an A. The fact is, Black Forest Games knew exactly what aspects of gameplay they needed to refine, while also taking the time to honor the original's cheesy aesthetics. This is a classic open-world sandbox remade and perfected for our current generation. Combat is a wonderful symphony of chaos, and destroying 50s America has never looked better. The fact is, if you didn't have the chance to play this game when it first came out, then now's the best time to go down to Earth and destroy some humans. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. I'm the Grave Tender, and thank you for joining me on the other side. Please consider subscribing, and I hope you all have a nice day.